ora tātou, ko te o takiti mua hau, kua hau tētahi o ngā roia mo te iwi. This video is a little explanation of where we got to with the treaty settlement and the process that we're now embarking on for the iwi to say yes or no to sign up to the treaty settlement going forward with the Crown. And so I'm going to talk you through, just by way of whakamārama, some of the key aspects of the settlement and the process to date, and we'll supplement this video and this explanation with some documents and fact sheets that will go up onto the website and be distributed throughout Hui so that you can get into the nitty-gritty of the detail and make an informed decision. Let's launch into it. First of all, as most of the iwi know, this has been a very long process for us. We've been at the negotiation table in some shape or form with the Crown for the last 20 years. Either over taku taimōna or over historic treaty settlements. The negotiation team was tasked by the Hapū at home with going down to Wellington and engaging with the Crown over that prolonged period of time to come up with an agreement that was basically the best offer that we could extract from the Crown in terms of correcting and realigning the treaty relationship as we know it. We've now done that. It's taken a long period of time, and there's been some time that we've not been at the negotiation table because things have been a little bit tense. So there's been other times we've had and experienced good faith negotiations throughout the process. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag over those 20 years, but we've now got to a point where we can deliver back a finalised product to the iwi by way of treaty settlement. And now, as always, the request of the iwi from the outset in instructing the negotiation team was that the Hapū at home, and respecting the mana of the Hapū would get to say yes or no to whether they wanted to sign up and whether they thought the Crown offer was going to be good enough. We're now at that point that we're bringing that deed of settlement back, and the Hapū can make up their minds about whether you think it's good enough. What I can say from a negotiation team point of view is we didn't get everything our own way, as is very often the case in negotiations, but we've pushed the Crown in absolutely every direction we could to extract the best agreement we can table in front of the iwi. It's up to the iwi now to decide whether that's good enough for our mokopuna. So in terms of the negotiating brief and about what the negotiations has been about, for us, this has been about fighting for our tribal territory and the sanctity of our tribal territory as it was left to us by our tipuna and as we hold it in trust for our mokopuna. As most people know, there's been a number of Crown breaches that have occurred throughout history that have impacted on our ability to hold our lands and our territories and have impacted on our population. We have tried to seek Crown accountability for that through this process. To be clear, we're not asking the Crown for any new rights. We're not asking the Crown for ownership that we don't think they have to bestow on us. We are very clear going into negotiations what our treaty rights and entitlements and responsibilities are. We know essentially what the treaty promise was that our tipuna signed up to, and we've been looking to move the Crown and give the Crown an opportunity to be honourable where they have previously been dishonourable towards our iwi for a prolonged period of time. So this has been about giving the Crown the opportunity to correct their behaviour and to realign the treaty relationship so it is healthier and it is more in line with the original treaty promise that our tipuna signed up to. There's a number of guarantees, as you know, inside the text of Te Tiriti o Waitangi that we have looked to have acknowledged throughout this negotiations process. It would be fair to say we feel like we've moved the Crown some of the way towards better alignment with that treaty relationship, and we've sought some redress to correct some of their breaches and the impact of those on our people. This treaty settlement was never going to be the delivery of complete treaty justice or the complete implementation of the treaty relationship, because that depends on us having an honourable treaty partner in Wellington that we're still looking for to some extent. We're still trying to get them there. So what happened first in the negotiations process was really brought about by the urgency by which the Crown moved their attempted raupatu on a taku taimōna. And so the taku taimōna negotiations started in 2003, 2004. They were the most immediate thing for us to deal with at that point in time because the Crown was threatening, as you know, to pass legislation that would strip away those rights. Te Whānau Apanui and Ngā Hapū negotiated in partnership with the Crown to have our rights recognised, notwithstanding that legislation, so that we could protect what we sort of refer to as our Tangaroa estate, our seaward area and our seaward boundaries of our iwi. That's been important to Apanui because we have retained 97% of our coastal land holdings, and we've wanted to make sure that the sanctity of our tribal territory and the integrity of our territory remains intact, notwithstanding what the Crown are doing in Wellington. So those negotiations kicked off first. They stopped and started for a while, depending on where the Crown were at and whether we were able to engage with them in an honourable way. And then later in the piece, as the government changed and we saw different administrations come in and out, later on in the equation came the historic treaty settlement process. Historic treaty settlements are for holding the Crown to account for what they call historic breaches of the Treaty of Waitangi. So those are breaches that occurred from the signing of the treaty, so that for us in Apanui is the 14th of June 1840 to 1992. Those are what are considered by legal definition to be historic treaty breaches. Breaches that the Crown committed from 1992 to the present day are part of contemporary treaty breaches that the Crown will still need to be held to account for and will still be responsible for correcting in the future, but they are not part of this historic treaty settlement. They will come later in time. That is a different part of holding the Crown accountable for a different part in time. These historic treaty negotiations are time-bound from 1840 to 1992. So we say that on the 14th of June 1840, our tipuna who signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi secured some guarantees for us, and those guarantees should be honoured by the Crown in partnership with them as part of our constitutional relationship with the Crown. So part of those guarantees contained, particularly in Article 2, say that we should have full, exclusive and undisturbed possession of our lands, forests, fisheries, kāinga and all other taonga. We know from 1840 to 1992 that there were a number of breaches of those rights where the Crown came in, they imposed their land tenure system, they changed the way that land ownership was held, they fractioned up our tribal estate and they imposed their own laws and their own education system, their health system and various other colonial mechanisms over top of our iwi. We've said to them that as we know, the colonial method and the colonial experience has really hurt and harmed our people over successive generations, and we want them held to account for that. Not only do we want them held to account for that for the justice that our tipuna deserve, but also to realign the relationship for our mokopuna. So this is what this process has been about for us, resetting and realigning and holding the Crown responsible. We're asking the Crown to honour their treaty obligations and to recognise in law our mana and our right to exercise our mana free from the interference. You'll see from the treaty settlement that's been negotiated, we've got some of the way there. We haven't by any stretch of the imagination got all of the way there. But what we've tried to do is protect the iwi going forward by making sure that there's some clear ring fencing around our rights and entitlements. So this is acknowledged as a partial step towards treaty implementation. It's not the final resting place for our treaty relationship with the Crown. That will continue to evolve and we hope improve as we go forward. After the Crown acknowledges their breaches and apologises for them, there is then a compensation or redress package that is negotiated to go some way towards rectifying and correcting the Crown breaches. The redress packages don't get all the way there by way of total 100% compensation, and it would be difficult to do that anyway because we're talking about long-standing breaches that have occurred over multiple generations. So it is a symbolic gesture largely from the Crown to put together a redress package that says this is how we feel we can fairly compensate the iwi for the impact that we've had upon them. Inside the redress package, some things that are pure sort of compensation, like the return of certain blocks of land or financial compensation to the iwi. There's other things that are built into there that are more future looking, that talk about the realignment of the relationship going forward. So we've negotiated relationships with different Crown departments about how they will conduct themselves when they come into the iwi and how our relationship will be better going forward. It was important for Apanui always, even within a historic treaty settlement, it was important for us always to leave our mokopuna in a better position in terms of trying to realign the treaty relationship going forward so that we wouldn't just let the Crown off the hook for all of the historic wrongs that they've done, but then the very next day they continue going about breaching our rights. What we wanted to do was put some frameworks in place so that our iwi going forward would have a better treaty relationship with the Crown, and we've negotiated agreements with each of the Crown departments really that set out the protocols between us going forward. Again, it's not the totality of treaty implementation. That still is an aspirational thing that we'll work towards as an iwi, but it's a step in that direction to try and realign these relationships going forward. Just to recap, the iwi sets out our allegations against the Crown of their breaches against us. Then the Crown go through and say, yes, we admit we did certain things and we admit the impact of them, and now here we apologise and we provide some redress and some compensation for that. What happens then is that's drawn up into this deed of settlement, and we deliver it back to the iwi to say, do you agree to that? Do you agree that the setting out of your history and then the Crown admission of their wrongs and their apology for it, plus the compensation, do you agree that is a fair exchange for the settling of all of your claims against the Crown from 1840 to 1992? That effectively is the decision in front of the iwi now as we come into this ratification process. And ratification is just a flash legal way of saying consent. Do you give consent for this?